I'm Malloy, I review things, and welcome back. When you think of spy and espionage movies these days, what do you actually think of? What first springs to mind when you think of that particular genre in this day and age of 2019? Well, of course, we've got the Mission Impossible movie starring Tom Cruise as the eponymous American spy slash, I don't know what you call him, it's basically Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. But of course, we cannot think about spy movies without, of course, the one that started it all, 007, James Bond. And to celebrate the fact that this is the very first James Bond film I'm reviewing, I've put out all the stops. I got my trusted Walther PPK, well I haven't, but take my word for it, I did look for it, trust me. I'm wearing my eponymous tuxedo, well again, I'm not, but hopefully this is still good. But I did get one thing to make sure that this film review goes as well as can be expected and is given all the class that a James Bond review deserves, my very own killer top hat. Let's see if it works. I need to go grab that later. So when it comes to James Bond, I freely admit I am an absolute massive fanboy when it comes to all things 007. The films themselves were some of the best movies that I remember watching as a kid. I loved every single one, and I collected every single one. First of all, watching them at my local video store. Yes, such things did exist beyond Blockbuster. As well as actually buying the VCR collection themselves and watching them time and time again. These films were my childhood, and they are a defining feature of British culture. These films have defined an entire genre of movies since the first one was released back in 1962. And so, I hate to say it, when I have to admit, some of them really aren't that great. Take, for example, the feature of today's presentation, 1974's The Man with the Golden Gun. The Man with the Golden Gun! Released in the UK on the 19th of December 1974, The Man with the Golden Gun was the 9th feature film of the James Bond franchise and the second to feature Roger Moore, coming 1 year after his debut in Live and Let Die. This was the 4th and final film of the James Bond franchise, directed by Guy Hamilton, the man who gave us the eponymous Goldfinger, as well as the two lesser examples, Diamonds Are Forever and Live and Let Die. Coming off 1965's You Only Live Twice, the producers were clearly looking to try and film in different exotic locations that Bond had not featured in before. Hence this film featuring heavily in Thailand, Hong Kong, Macau, and a very brief scene in Beirut, Lebanon, even though that scene was not filmed in Lebanon. And in the early 1970s, some of the more famous mainstream movies that were getting everyone's attention were Bruce Lee movies and martial arts movies in general. This is basically a martial arts kung fu movie slash environmental message movie that has James Bond in it. I really don't understand. I get that they were trying new things. To give the Man with the Golden Gun some credit, their casting for the main villain is absolutely superb. Sir Christopher Lee himself plays the main eponymous villain, Francisco Scaramanga, aka the Man with the Golden Gun. A little bit of trivia, Ian Fleming was actually the step-cousin of Sir Christopher Lee. The film also stars Hervé Villechaize as Nick Nack, who would go on to far greater acclaim playing Tattoo in the American TV series Fantasy Island. The theme song for The Man with the Golden Gun was given to Lulu, who was absolutely massive for her huge hits in Shout and 1969's UK Eurovision winner Boom Banga Bang. It's just a pity that the song itself is absolute garbage. One golden shot means another poor victim has come to a glittering end. For a price he'll erase anyone, the man with a golden gun. The producers of the movie originally wanted either Elton John or Cat Stevens to sing the eponymous song. They ended up going with Lulu when those guys, well, they just said no. Composer John Barry has gone on the record as stating that he absolutely hated the song for this movie, going on the record as saying, "It's the one I hate the most, it just never worked for me." Not all Bond songs have to be subtle, but there's a difference between being subtle and slamming the audience with a sledgehammer to get the point across. Originally, the film was going to be written as a test of wits and skills and a battle of equals between Scaramanga and Bond. But that particular portion was deleted, or at the very least heavily reduced, in the later drafts of the screenplay. I really don't understand it. You've got Christopher Lee as your main villain. He is built up as one of the greatest and most feared assassins in the entire espionage community. He's going up against James Bond, the legendary 007, who is regarded not just as the United Kingdom's greatest spy, perhaps one of the greatest spies in the world. And you decide to focus more on your MacGuffin rather than an actual battle of wills between these two super assassins. What were you thinking? The main thrust of the plot for this movie is, as I mentioned, focused on the energy crisis, which was blighting most of Western Europe at the time in 1973. And as such, the producers had to come up with a way to get Bond involved in the plot, and so we're thrown the MacGuffin known as the Solex agitator, a device that is apparently, for some reason, going to solve all the planet's energy problem overnight. And we're meant to be excited about the fact that the entire plot of this film doesn't revolve around a super assassin gunning for Bond. No, it's so that Bond can get hold of this little plastic box to save people from not being able to flicking the lights on. Speaking about completely bizarre choices, this film, The Man with the Golden Gun, decided to bring back a character who had appeared in a previous Bond movie. Who could it be? Is it a previous Bond girl who now is going to be involved in the plot again somehow? Is she a ally turned enemy? Is it Felix Leiter, his CIA counterpart? Who is it? Is it a former villain? The producers decided to rehire and bring back Louisiana Sheriff J.W. Pepper.
Press that pedal, boy.
For people who've watched Live and Let Die, J.W. Pepper turns up about halfway through the film as a sort of obstacle to Bond, in that he's a racist Louisiana sheriff who is gunning down for Bond, as well as trying to kill the drug dealers / Harlem gangsters. They decided to bring this guy back for this movie, and they make him even more pointless, which I didn't even know was possible. J.W. Pepper turns up about halfway through The Man with the Golden Gun on holiday in Thailand with his wife when he catches sight of Bond as he's escaping his latest capture from Scaramanga's henchmen. I don't get it. Why did they think that this was a good idea? You've got a Louisiana redneck detective / sheriff getting involved in this film, which is now set in Hong Kong, and all you can give him to do is just say racist things about the Thai police? You're weird. So if the casting choices and the actual plot lines don't make sense in this film, some of the sequences themselves are just as bad. There's a scene in Beirut where Bond has to track down the original golden bullet when he believes that Scaramanga has sent another bullet as a calling card to say that he's coming to murder Bond. It then leads to him going to a strip bar in Beirut where he's accosted by a bunch of heavies before he manages to get said bullet off this stripper. You think, first of all, that it's actually part of the plot that Scaramanga has sent these goons to beat up Bond to prevent him from getting hold of the evidence which would tie Scaramanga to this latest event. But no. No. As it turns out, Scaramanga doesn't even know that Bond is involved. As it turns out, Scaramanga didn't even send the new bullet. He has no idea that Bond is involved in this story. It turns out it's his henchwoman who sends it as a way to get Bond to kill Scaramanga. And even better, we never get an explanation as to who these goons were who suddenly decided to beat up Bond when he was trying to get this other bullet from this call girl, for want of a better word. It makes no sense. They just wanted an action scene at this part of the film. And you only realise how pointless and absolutely unnecessary it is when the film ends. Did you really have to pad out your running time this much? I suppose any excuse to get a belly dancer in? I guess. When it comes to Bond girls, there's a fair bit of controversy, isn't there? They're seen as not feminist. They're seen as an aberration these days, an outdated concept, and why a lot of people seem to have a problem with James Bond movies in this day and age. And to be fair to them, the producers have attempted to do various different things to make the Bond girl less stereotypical. And I'm not saying that all of them have been. Some of the Bond girls have been absolutely amazing. Honor Blackman as Pussy Galore, Grace Jones as Mayday. These are women who are strong and powerful and really interesting characters in their own right, who give Bond a run for his money. But sometimes, yeah, the argument is true that some of the Bond girls, they've just been crap. And the Bond girl in The Man with the Golden Gun is perhaps the greatest example for that. Mary Goodnight in the film is meant to be the female equivalent for Bond. She's meant to be his assistant who assists him with espionage and intelligence gathering as part of his mission to get the Solex Agitator and track down Scaramanga. She's a fucking atrocious character, and I really can't mince my words any better than that. She is absolutely appalling. She turns up immediately, and the first thing we know about her is that she's a bit dim. She turns up late. Bond even doesn't want her there. He has no idea that it's her who's been assigned to be his assistant, and Roger Moore's actual reaction to her turning up is priceless, because I honestly don't know whether it's Bond who is not interested in having her, but if it's actually Roger Moore himself who is livid at the thought that he's stuck with this broad for the rest of the movie. Mary Goodnight is not competent. Mary Goodnight is not interesting. Mary Goodnight actually ends up making things worse for Bond throughout the entire film. She ends up getting kidnapped by Scaramanga when she just so happens to have the MacGuffin in her possession, which basically then means that Bond has to try and find her in order to prevent Scaramanga from winning the day. Mary Goodnight as well ends up making things worse in the climax of the movie, because she's the one responsible for the villain's headquarters going up in flames and meaning that Bond and her have to escape. And how does she manage to make it even worse for Bond beyond all that? There's a scene where Bond is trying to get hold of the Solex, which is actually stuck in a machine that Scaramanga has had built. Whilst he's trying to get hold of it, there is a laser pointing above him. It can only be activated if someone stupidly presses a button which will open the roof of the building and allow the sunlight to activate the laser. Guess what Mary Goodnight does? She activates it. How does she activate it? She presses the button with her arse. Oh, and to cap it all off, she's in the skimpiest little bikini that the producers and costume makers could have possibly have put this actress in. So overall, what can we say about The Man with the Golden Gun? Basically, it's a mess from start to finish. I really don't understand why so many people give The Man with the Golden Gun a pass. I fully 100% believe that it is the worst Roger Moore movie, and it's definitely up there as perhaps in the top 3 of worst Bond movies altogether. It's perhaps not as bad as, say, Moonraker or Diamonds Are Forever, but it is damn close. From the plot that goes absolutely nowhere, to the multiple missed opportunities with casting such a brilliant actor as Christopher Lee, and giving him barely anything to do, and wasting so much potential in giving Bond an actual, genuine equal to fight against. I would say, if you want to get into James Bond, particularly the Roger Moore Bond, I would skip his early films altogether and go straight to The Spy Who Loved Me. You will see a much better Bond, and you'll have a much more enjoyable time of it. Overall, it's definitely bad. I'd recommend checking it out just to see how bad it is. I'm Malloy, I review things. Now where's that hat?